Hey, welcome back to my channel. It's Visuals by Damie, or you could just say Damie. And today we're going to be talking about renting versus buying, and why people always seem to think that buying is always better than renting in almost every circumstance. But today we're going to talk about why it might not be. So people usually think that buying is better than renting because they have like a traditional value system or something. Because we're always just told that renting is worse and you're just throwing your money away. So everyone's like, oh, you're buying a home, you're building equity, you're putting money towards like your future and like, you know, just helping later in your future, being able to own your property and whatnot. So that it does make sense to go along those guidelines, but that's only the case if you're deciding to actually stay in that city or wherever you are for like not the foreseeable future, but like an extended period of time. And personally for me, that is just not the wave. I live in Winnipeg and I'm not trying to stay in Winnipeg for the rest of my life. So when we were going through this process of looking for either properties or renting an apartment, for me, I was like like it makes sense to buy a house because it always just makes sense to buy a house. But I was thinking, if we were to decide to move within a year, or literally because the lease is a year, so we're using that time frame within a year. Sure, we could sell the house, but first of all, we're not getting any of that money back because how much equity can you really build in a year? Then you have to go through the process of selling the house by yourself or with a realtor. But either way, if you go with a realtor, you have all these closing costs and stuff. But even if you do it by yourself, you have all the stress of like dealing with buyers, and that's just why, off the top of my head, I was like, you don't really want to go with buying a property or a house or whatever. There are pros and cons to everything in life. And the pros for buying a house, I've already listed a couple of them. Like for one, building equity. You get your own property, you have your own space, no one can tell you what to do. Like you don't have to worry about landlords and such because you are your own landlord. And the biggest con of owning a house is definitely, without a doubt, the maintenance. And the pros and cons list of the house is going to be lopsided. There's more pros than cons because the biggest one is the maintenance for me. For the cons, like yard maintenance, obviously house maintenance, like buying a lawnmower and shit, like it's just not something that I'm trying to do yet. And then the pros for an apartment, well, you can move easily. You don't have to worry about any maintenance. That's a big thing. Literally anything that happens, it's you just call someone and then they get it done for you because you have a landlord and you don't have to stress about that. And then this is a pro that a lot of people don't think about that I thought about on the toot my own horn or anything, but it's like the level of lifestyle that you want, you can't afford for the most part when you're trying to buy that lifestyle with a house or in a house. Like the apartment that we live in is a luxury apartment and it's super nice. It's like basically a perfect aesthetic. But if we were to look for a house in this type of vibe, this kind of aesthetic, it's gonna be way out of our price range. Like we're talking 500 plus. And that's obviously not something we're trying to do right now, especially with your first home. So that's a big pro that people don't think about. You can get the lifestyle that you want, the aesthetic that you want, all the looks that you want, but without having like to pay an exorbitant amount of money, and it's just like a monthly thing. Another pro about an apartment that I don't think is talked about enough, like obviously pre and post COVID times, is that you get to actually meet more people in a sense. Like with a house, obviously you have your neighbors and such, but even with our old house that we used to live in with our parents, I can count the amount of times I talked to any of our neighbors on one hand. But with an apartment complex, and if it like the people are around like the same kind of age or whatever, you get to meet people closer in your age range. Like even if it's just like passing each other in hallways, elevators, and like this complex has 2 lounges, I believe. So the odds of you meeting people increase drastically more than if you were just like driving into your driveway and going inside your house and obviously not meeting anyone. And obviously this isn't guaranteed, but it's a thing that could happen. And some people are gonna say, yeah, you don't want to meet people anyway. But personally, for me, networking, it's not the worst thing. Obviously, there are times that I don't want to talk to people, and you can easily just get along without talking to anyone. But for the people who feel lonely or like just want to expand their friend group, network group, it's a lot easier when we live in a huge complex with a bunch of people, you know? So the cons are gonna be kind of like how I had with the house, with just one big con of obviously the rent, because it is technically just throwing money away because you're never gonna see that money again. But you're paying what you get, and you're paying for what you get. Okay, so this is where everyone gets it all mixed up because everyone's like, oh, you're paying this much in rent, you could be paying this much in mortgage, and then instead of throwing away your rent money, you can be putting it towards equity in your future. But that's not how it works because you can't directly compare those two numbers because yes, rent is an unrecoverable cost, but there's also a lot of unrecoverable cost that comes with owning a home. Like you also have to tally up like the property tax, the maintenance costs. Like I already said, the maintenance hits, okay? Because obviously there's like the little things of lawnmower, you need to like cut some bushes or some stuff, but there's also the big ticket items of like your plumbing, your water heater, your roof. Obviously those don't happen often, but for example, when we're leaving our house, my dad was talking about how he has to replace the roof soon, and this is like the preventative replacement. That's $5K for preventative. Imagine if it was like you had to do it. It's probably gonna be more than that, right? And that's $5K just gone, just like that, just for maintenance. But I don't have to think about that because we have a landlord. And after you've talked about your property taxes and then your maintenance cost, then that's when you put on the mortgage cost and then any opportunity cost. Like for example, one of the points I made to my sister when I was like defending getting this apartment instead of getting a property was that we know exactly how much we're going to be spending each month on rent. Like it's a set like 1,000, and we don't have to worry about anything else because especially since our hydro, our water and something else is covered, but I can't remember. Oh, our Wi-Fi is covered, so we only have to worry about hydro. So we don't have to have any random bursts of money out of nowhere, out of pocket that are like, oh, we didn't plan for this. So with knowing how much we have each month and we can actually budget, we can decide how much we want to put aside for investments. And obviously you can do that with the house too, because you know approximately how much you have to spend a month. But again, like some things can come up. But with knowing how much we have each month, we can put that aside towards when we want to buy our actual investment properties. So to add on top of that with the whole opportunity cost. So obviously when you're buying a house, you have to put down a certain amount of the down payment, which is like between 5 to 30%. So, or 5 to 20%, I mean. So it could easily be between 10 and 30K. And between us at least, it'll be split in half. So between 5 to 15K. So instead of putting down the 5 to 15K into the house and then maybe a 1% return over appreciation year over year, we could put it, like personally for me, I invest in the stock market, and I wouldn't put all of it into the stocks because I'm not that good yet, but you know, you can put it into the stock market where it grow an average of like 6% a year, or put it elsewhere or invest it in my business. Like there's just so many other things that I could do personally with that money other than just putting it into the house and then not really seeing a return on my money for quite some time. And then the fact that I don't want to live in the same city for the rest of my life, the odds of it actually giving me that return if we decide to sell it when we move, it's just not even close to what I can get back even within a year of putting that money elsewhere. But those are just a couple of reasons why I decided that we should rent a place instead of buying a place, because we are still looking at buying properties, but they're going to be investment properties, so it's a whole different ballgame. And the 5% rule is a lot more to it than just listing off like the things you have to take into consideration. But that's a whole nother video by itself because you got to go pretty deep into it and make actual calculations that could be coming in the future. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are trying to decide whether or not to buy or rent a home, I hope this helped a little bit, because personally for me, I think renting, at least now at a younger age, is just smarter, because you have your whole life to buy a home, honestly. But if you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you think. And until then, signing out.